Do you have a moment to talk about our Lord and Saviour, me?
So, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Excommunicated podcast. I'm Jess.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Alex.
Alex is back.
Yay!
Hello.
We love you, Alex.
Hello.
Arthur was meant to be here with us today, but unfortunately his internet is still crapping out. So he will be back soon, guys. Don't worry.
Yeah, there's a pain with the internet though, isn't it?
It is a pain.
In the meantime, we'll just have to settle for me.
Yay!
Yay!
My non-family member, just
acquaintance.
friend.
Just acquaintance at this point. We've met once.
If you've never heard our podcast before, Tom and I are ex-Christians who are talking through our deconversion journeys after decades in the church. And we're joined by Alex, who is a lifelong atheist,
Yeah.
question mark.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
And Alex has a really unique perspective on this series that we're doing at the moment because she was an atheist at the time that we were going through this church plant, and she was like my sounding board. So every time we'd meet, I had to like have a connection to the outside world, a little bit of sanity, and I would tell her everything that was going on, probably through like a little bit of a filtered point of view.
Mhm.
We'll probably find out. I think you heard the softer version of what was really
Yeah.
going on.
The
Yeah.
Cliff Notes.
Yeah.
The cliff notes, and yeah, you would just be my sounding board, and I would ramble to you, and I'm really interested to know how that differs from the true story
Mhm.
as we go through this. But if you haven't listened to this series so far, this is the third installment of our church planting series. Tom and I were on a church plant.
If the more we look at it, is that we were on a church cult plant.
Mm-hmm.
But
Less church, just cult.
More cult.
Yeah.
I think more of that's going to come out later. But wow.
Yeah, and it got probably dramatic and toxic, and it led to us becoming atheists. So it's quite an interesting series. It's been hard for us to drag it all up.
Yeah, it's not easy. It really isn't easy.
No.
But what's encouraging is that someone else on the Facebook group also said that they were involved in a church plant and also became atheists. So yeah, if you want to become an atheist, start a church.
Exactly. It's really weird because you'd think this would be a place where people got more, like, got stronger in their faith,
Sure.
got more close to God. But no, it was quite the opposite, and other people have had the same experience. So
And in fact, the church plants that we were involved in originally, I think most of them failed.
yeah, like 90% of them are
Yeah.
no longer running.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spiritual warfare.
So part of me thinks, like, it's not just ours, which is great, but it proves that the way these are being set up, the way these are being run, the way these are being handled is just so wrong.
Yeah.
It's just not.
They were using the wrong people with the wrong motives. I
Mhm.
mean, as we talked, and we might find about later on, it was all looking at a business. You know, it wasn't looking at the real people in the community. It was all like business models of how are we going to win these people?
Yeah.
Not for Christ, but for their money. Almost, is that sort of business models all the time. Elevator pitches and, all
Mhm.
these things. I mean, rubbish, really. Absolute rubbish.
And I would say it's destroying people
Mm.
more than it is building people up, more than it is building communities. It's done so much damage.
But isn't Christianity that anyway? Isn't Christianity about judging and bringing people, and saying how much of a sinner you are? Look at
Mhm.
you wretched person, But Jesus
Yeah.
can save you.
I mean, you're not wrong, Tom.
Yeah.
But last week we went over the time together in the planting course, so the very, very early days of setting up, how the team got together, and also hiring our worship leader,
Mhm.
which Alex was horrified by the interview process.
I was so angry about that.
Yeah.
That's the poor girl.
I mean, you actually have an interview later on today, don't you?
I
for
do.
An important project you're working on, non-religious, thankfully.
Thankfully, I don't have to go to someone's house for it.
I know. Imagine if he invited you and he was like, "It's a group interview. There's 12 other people, and it's at someone's house with alcohol."
No, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I'm no longer
Yeah.
interested in the job.
You're smarter than us.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
are smarter than us. But go back and listen to that episode if you haven't, because this episode won't make any sense. Otherwise, you won't know the names and the
Mhm.
places. Because this week we're going to be talking about the first breakdown of the team, really, and the signs that we were very dysfunctional.
Sure.
The signs that there was favoritism, that there was bitching, all these horrible things that shouldn't be going on in a church,
Mhm.
and that we were in it for the wrong reasons. I guess you
Yes.
could say.
Do you guys feel like you were in it for the wrong reasons?
No, I don't. I mean, that is an interesting question, and I can't really put myself back all those years to remember exactly what I
Mhm.
was thinking. But we were in it for God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
We weren't getting paid. We weren't really getting anything out of it other than stress. But I just remember thinking this is all for God. And so every time a red flag would show, or every time someone was acting inappropriately or manipulating us, it would all be worth it because God was behind it.
Yeah, sure.
It was for Him,
Yeah, and any discomfort, well, he'll bless us later on.
and you had to put that all aside.
Sure.
You couldn't be selfish, I guess, and so people would wrong you, and you'd accept it because
Turn the other cheek.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Did you ever feel guilty if you weren't having a good time because of all these like interpersonal issues? Did you ever feel guilty that you weren't doing enough for God? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does make sense. I don't know, Tom, what do you think?
Guilt was always involved in everything you did within church, I think.
Mhm.
So if you didn't feel close to God, it was, well, because you're not spending enough time with him personally.
It's your own fault.
It's your
yeah.
own fault. Are you spending time praying and meditating
Mhm.
on his word? It's that sort of thing. So guilt is inherent in church. So whatever you're feeling, it was because you're not doing the right thing. So
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, guilt was the number one thing, I think, in everything you did.
Yeah.
Christianity's great.
It is.
It's a really good,
It's
Like a
so
fun
good.
religion.
ride. Yeah.
Yeah.
really good. If you want to feel good about yourself, don't join.
Yeah.
So last week we left it off where we were kind of finishing up the course,
Mm-hmm.
and we had done all the WhatsApp talking and sending memes and acting like children during the plant course, and Sophie had been witnessing that. Now I'll never know what she was thinking at that time, but it couldn't have been a good first impression.
No.
So after the planting course, we had a couple of months before we were officially launching. We still didn't have the building yet.
Mhm.
And about 2 months before launch day, David arranged an away day at a Christian retreat. Now, what do you think a Christian retreat is like, Alex?
I don't know. I've been to church camp, so I'm gonna base it on that.
How old were you at church camp?
14 or 15,
Okay.
I think.
I
And
think-
again, I just did it to get a free weekend away with friends. I didn't care for God, but I was like, weekend away, yeah, free
Sounds
food,
great, yeah.
let's do that. And we went away to like a house, and you slept over, and we ate food, and we learned some Bible stories, and then everybody would come together in the end, and there'd be a band playing, and everybody would sing songs, and it was all very embarrassing.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that about it?
That sounds about right,
Yeah.
really. Yeah.
But imagine you're also adults now, so your brain's fully developed and you're choosing this.
Okay.
Slightly different.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be like a bonding exercise for the team because even though we'd been going to all these meetings and we'd been going on the plant course, aside from like us and David and Sarah, the team still wasn't fully
Sure.
bonded
Yeah.
like they wanted us to be, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, we knew each other, but I didn't know certain
Mhm,
people. So, I could wave and say hello and this sort of thing, but I wouldn't actually know anything about the other team members as
Yeah.
such, or some of them anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, we were meant to spend the day bonding and getting our mission statement together. We did a lot of worship. And looking back on it, it was probably just another excuse for David to get his guitar out.
Mm-hmm.
It was just singing songs, basically. We didn't do anything
No.
spiritual.
No, I can't. I think I remember him reading one verse, and then it was almost, and now into worship.
Mhm.
And he would always quote Paul, so I can't remember the verse, but I can almost imagine that it won't be anyone else apart from reading something from Paul,
Mhm.
and then let's worship together and spend time together worshiping.
Yeah.
And there was no other Bible content. That was it.
No, and bear in mind, this is a full day we're at this retreat. So it's like a work day hours.
Mhm.
You're there for like 10 hours
Yeah.
plus.
Mm-hmm.
And we ate some food together and we went for like a walk in the countryside. But apart from that, it was just worship,
Hmm.
which is what he loved to do. It was what the whole church was based around, really, which is why we had our first employee, Sophie, a confused worship leader at this point. She was sort of
Yeah.
like, what is my job? What is my role? We went for a walk in the countryside. You met, well, not met, but you spoke to Jim,
For the first time,
ever.
yeah, that's right. I mean, I remember, going out with our wellies because it was all muddy, going across the fields and just finding out about Jim and who he was basically.
Mhm.
And yet he was another team member who we were supposed to be working with within weeks. But yeah, I didn't know much about him at all. So it was nice. I had a good day. I really did enjoy the day. I like food. I like the countryside. And I like walks. So for me, it ticked a lot of boxes, and it felt, there are little fairy lights up and things. It looked really, it was like, oh, this is lovely. I like this.
And you like the guitar. So
And
that sweet the deal, really.
That's it. So, really, it was a nice day. It was a good day.
As people who, as Christians, did you feel like it was missing some of that more biblical content? That's the word I'm looking for.
I should have, definitely. And I know that 2 of the people on the team did. I know that Laura was quite upset that it wasn't very biblically sound. It wasn't very God-focused the whole day. And again, her father was a really dedicated, sound pastor. So she was used to a more structured church approach, whereas David was very much like bottle of wine, a guitar, we'll all get on, it'll be fine. And there was never, again, that should have been a red flag, but there was never biblical teaching from him.
No, I mean,
ever.
It was refreshing in a sense when you've been to a really staunch church where everything was strict and boring and, historically correct or whatever, to then be with someone who was so laid back and, hey guys, it's great to be here. Let's just spend time with each other. Let's just sing a few songs with each other. And it was so laid back. It was like, oh yeah, this is refreshing.
You thought it was fun.
Yeah, but it was so shallow. So shallow. It was pathetic. But initially it was like, oh, this is great. I love this. Yeah.
So did you ever have any idea that I was away on this like Christian retreat? I don't remember if I ever told you.
I think you did tell me. I think I saw some pictures of you guys going out for the walk, which again is a very strange thing to remember, but I remember that. So I think that you told me about it, but you didn't really tell me what went on. I just knew that you went for a walk.
Okay.
That's it.
No, that's fair.
You just remember the walk.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Did you ever know I was at the level of like Christian retreat worship days and working on this team? Like,
no.
I think you said last week you weren't sure what level of it was work for me and what level of it was church.
Yeah.
The lines kind of blurred.
Yeah, definitely. Because obviously you guys have your own business, and then they would come over to your place of work, and then you had Sarah as like a semi-employee there for a little while. So the lines always seemed very blurred.
They were.
Which is healthy. Very healthy.
Yeah. So I didn't know. I thought you were just like surface level Christians, not like elbow deep cult level Christians.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
we were up to our waist.
Yeah.
We were wading in.
Yeah. We were going over our notes for this episode yesterday and going over like our little scripts and getting our thoughts together. And we actually got really, really upset, didn't we? We got really affected and offended.
Yeah.
Really affected. Like our mood the whole day was so low because we were first of all so gullible. So gullible and so susceptible to be swept up in this, which we'll talk more about it.
Sure.
And we're also not like the good guys in this story.
No, and that's the horrible thing to realise, that actually, when we're looking back at this, not intentionally, but we're going to come across as being horrible people. So sorry, guys.
Like there's some stuff in these stories that we're going to tell over the next several weeks, and there's horrible stuff happening, but we're not just witnessing it; we're participating in it too.
Yeah.
And that's going to suck.
And
so that really affected us.
It affected us because we suddenly realised how much of a cult we were in, how controlled we were. And it was like, I'm a strong character. How on earth can some people don't control me? And I suddenly realised, oh man, no, I was completely controlled by this situation. And how much of a cult it was. When you go to a church normally, you attend and you sing a couple of songs and you sing, you say a prayer, have a cup of tea, and you go and you think, well, that's not a cult. No way is that a cult. But when you're actually in the team, in the leadership, and especially when you're in this starting a church, it just sucks you in so much into, as we were saying, sort of waist level, striding into the cult, basically, weren't we? And to get out of it, wow, you'll find out later on, it's so difficult. So difficult.
Yeah. It's going to be fun, guys.
Woohoo!
Yay, join in.
So at this point on this little away day, this little song and food day that we were having, we still had no idea that David and Sarah had told people behind our backs to stay away from us. We still had no.
No.
Had they done it by that point?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Oh,
they
they did it. Yeah, of course, because they did it before the course, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we were talking to everyone on this walk, and we were
Mm.
having a meal together, but there was still a distance. And David and Sarah had been telling us that this was because of jealousy,
Mm-hmm.
that everyone else on the team was really jealous and really angry about our closeness as the four of us, which obviously we now know isn't true. They were
Sure.
staying away from us because they thought we were damaged and struggling and needed space.
Yeah, I mean the friendships that we had, if I can call it a friendships, they were very surface level.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no depth there at all.
Colleagues.
They were, yeah, if that,
Mhm.
almost, and I can say that throughout the whole of our experience, so from this away day where we didn't know each other that well, the depth, that was probably as deep as I was ever going to get with
Mhm.
these other people. They
Yeah.
were just people we met with, people that we worked with, but that was it. There was nothing more,
Mhm.
purely because they were guarded themselves,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
because we were so damaged, supposedly.
And we wanted more with them, and we would say to David and Sarah, like, why is no one else on the team clicking with us?
Mm.
Why are people staying away from us? And they would just put it down to jealousy, and they would say, these people are, they're upset that we spend so much time together. They don't understand, etc., etc.,
Sure.
other controlling sentences.
So we've already got all these different cliques within this. So how big was this group at the time?
10 at the time.
10. Okay. But already that's like it's you two and David and Sarah. That's already split off.
Mhm.
So that's like half of
Yes,
the team. There's like
Yeah.
a clear divide between half the team
most
already.
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay.
Most definitely.
Mhm.
And we just couldn't understand it, and they just kept reinforcing that the rest of the team was jealous, they didn't understand
Mm.
us, etc., and just making that divide even bigger,
Mhm.
which is infuriating. So between this away day and the official launch day, David still had to be working from home because he couldn't get into the office because Pastor Ted,
Hmm.
who was the previous kind of leader of the church building that we were physically getting into, was refusing to move. And
He was a squatter.
he
was.
was a
He
church
was-
squatter.
Yeah, he
Church
was.
squatter.
Yeah.
He'd had this church for like decades.
Mhm.
Well, he started it, I think, hadn't he? I
Yeah.
mean, he was the one, when the building started, and he knew the congregation there, and it wasn't a very large congregation, but they went and they saw him every week, and
Was he being pushed out? Was
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Aw.
he really hated the idea that this new team with loads of funding was going to come into his physical building
Yeah.
and take over. And I can see now that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
He physically was there when the building was built.
How did you feel about him at the time? Were you just like, oh my god, move?
yes,
Yeah, because
yeah,
David and Sarah we'd never met this man.
Mhm.
We had never met him. And David and Sarah had told us that he was really lazy, really rude, hated the congregation,
hmm
missed services.
Mhm.
He was a mess. He needed to be pushed out.
yeah,
So we had this idea of him that he was incapable of doing his job. He was rude.
and a horrible person. Supposedly
Yeah.
he was grumpy and everything else, and we had this image of him as being horrible. So yeah, get out because the church plant is coming.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were very negative about him.
Hmm.
My views changed about him dramatically, and I don't know if we'll mention that,
In a future
in
episode.
a couple of
yeah.
episodes, but my views of him changed dramatically.
But at the time, we'd heard this version of him that he was
Mhm.
just this cantankerous old, horrible pastor that wouldn't move
Yeah,
and wouldn't let David into the office. And of course, we loved and worshipped David, so we thought he deserved to be in the office. But anyway, he wasn't moving out,
Sure.
so David was working from home. So all of his office equipment, all the PA equipment, everything was being delivered to his house. And David and Sophie, so
Mhm.
the worship leader, per her contract, were meant to be having daily
Mhm.
prayer mornings and Bible study from his house.
What is a prayer morning?
How do you explain this to someone who's an
yeah.
atheist?
I mean, basically, the prayer would be themed.
Okay.
Actually, first, what do you think a prayer meeting is? Describe what you think is happening at these things.
I really don't know. So I don't know. Do you hold hands? I don't know. Do you hold
That's
hands?
optional. Yeah,
Yeah.
some people do.
Do you close your eyes and somebody
Mhm.
says a prayer out loud and
Yeah.
You bow your head or close your eyes,
Yeah.
definitely.
but then how can that go on like a morning?
Yeah.
Like
Like
implies
hours.
a few
Yeah,
hours,
sure.
but
Yeah.
surely you can't be just doing that for hours.
Mhm.
Somebody's just talking for hours.
People take it in turns, and then there'll be some music playing, or you'll worship together, or some prayers will lead into other prayers, and then you'll get a message from God.
Or then you'll read some, something from the Bible, because God's put on my heart the fact that we should read Isaiah 54. So everyone then reads Isaiah 54 and says, yeah, you're right. God is saying that
You'll
we all
think
need
you're
to.
hearing from him,
Yeah.
literally.
That's really weird.
Yeah, it is weird. So because Sophie's job is one in the church, literally per their contract, she had to be having daily meetings with David
Mhm.
in his house, which was his like pseudo office for the minute.
Did he have a specific work area? Did he have like an office?
Yeah,
so
he
he
did,
had
yeah.
Okay.
he had a whole office with all of his books, his keyboard, his computers, things like that.
So there was a designated workspace.
Sure.
Yes.
I don't know why I'm so worried about like the professional boundaries of this.
No, you should be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep with that theme
Okay.
because it is important.
Yeah.
You know, this girl was very young,
Yeah.
employed by the church, and there wasn't much in place to protect those boundaries. So
'Cause
do,
if
do
you are
remain
just
worried.
Going over to I mean, he's the pastor really, but if she's just going over to some bloke's house and there's not
Mhm.
really anywhere. And
Yeah.
No, I mean, she's met him like twice before she's
Yeah.
Sure.
formally employed by him. So this is weird.
Yeah.
That is weird. But she started to become really, really frustrated because she was a very dedicated Christian, very dedicated. And the prayer meetings were never happening. Like, she would turn up to his house, he would still be in his pajamas.
See, that's inappropriate.
Yeah.
That's incredibly inappropriate.
But we're talking like 10 o'clock in the morning. He'd
Mhm.
be in his jammies in his office playing the piano.
And she would
Right.
turn up for work
Mm-hmm.
in her contracted work hours, and he
Mhm.
wouldn't be ready yet.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't leading prayer. He wasn't leading Bible study. She said that he was distracted, unmotivated, and frequently still not dressed
Okay.
for the day.
You can get away with that like once or twice. Like everyone sleeps in, you can get up and open the door. I'm so sorry. I've not woken up yet. I'll just go and get dressed, have a coffee.
But if you're
On the one
technically
occasion.
her superior,
Yeah. No.
No.
imagine how uncomfortable she felt.
And not just that, she's being employed again as the worship leader.
Mm-hmm.
So what work can a worship leader do for 5 days
When we're still months out of even getting in the building.
in the week? So it's literally, he had no idea what to do with her. He didn't want to do Bible study and things because basically he never did.
He wasn't interested.
So he used to tell her to go on to Spotify and make up worship playlists and things.
you
And
can-
so
What? She could be like doing quote unquote like lesson plans, like planning the different weeks and having like themes from the Bible and then planning worship
Yeah.
around those.
Yep.
I'm not even a Christian. I'm
Yes.
ready to go.
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. But so he had no idea. She had no idea. She had no direction. And so
This is one of the reasons Giles did not want to hire a worship leader
yeah,
yet. Like,
certainly.
what was the point?
Yeah.
Yeah, children's worker. Yeah, you could spend months preparing
Mhm.
in the office, working out what Bible stories you're going to do and all that sort of thing. But no, a worship leader. No, you don't need that until you're massive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where was Sarah in this? So if Sophie went over to David's house, where was Sarah and the kids?
So I guess the kids would be at school.
Oh yeah,
Sure.
that makes sense.
They weren't homeschooled or anything like that.
Yeah.
And Sarah would be kind of just hanging around the house. And so that became really, really distressing for both of them because Sarah became insanely jealous of Sophie.
Mm-hmm.
Unrightly so. Like,
Mhm.
completely, she had nothing to be jealous of, but she hated the fact that Sophie and David would be locked away in his office all day.
Yeah.
Sarah wouldn't know what they were doing. She clearly didn't trust David.
Yeah.
And she started to despise Sophie, like really hate her. She's this young,
Mm-hmm.
pretty girl
Mm-hmm.
who's locked up in an office with her husband all day.
Mhm.
She's
Who-
assuming the worst.
Yeah, and the young pretty girl who loves music, and
Mhm.
of course her husband loves music too.
Yeah.
So it's like
She really suspicious, and she'd start to speak to everyone sort of behind Sophie's back about how Sophie was. She would say Sophie was really cold. She would say that Sophie was putting David down all the time and these sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And none of us knew Sophie well enough to hear her
So
side
you'd
of
all
the story.
side with David.
Well, we would all side with Sarah because David, again,
Oh yeah.
was locked up in the office with Sophie, and they were meant to be planning things and writing things on the whiteboard and getting playlists together. Like,
Mhm.
very important work.
Yeah.
Definitely. Not praying together, though,
No.
because he didn't care about the spiritual status of anyone, really.
Did Sophie ever say she didn't feel fulfilled spiritually if she wasn't getting those prayer meetings that, he should be the spiritual guide, which sounds really lame, but
Yeah, he
No,
should be. Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, that is essentially what he's paid to do. If
Mhm.
he is the pastor and the leader of a new church plant, he should be concerned with everyone's spiritual well-being.
Mhm.
Well-being. He should be leading prayer. He should be leading worship. He should be
Mm.
studying the Bible. But he was in his pajamas. Like, he did not give a shit.
yeah.
And we didn't know this at the time. We weren't there during office hours. Like, we would all meet either for evening meetings, things like that. We didn't know what was going on in the office between Sophie and David.
No, and apart from what Sarah told us, of
Mhm.
course, and we do find out later on from Sophie, but at the very end. So,
Mhm.
What actually went on. So, yeah, it's the poor girl.
She didn't know who to share her concerns
I was going
with.
to say, was she voicing these concerns to anyone? Because she didn't really know anyone
she
yet.
wasn't close with anyone on the team.
Yeah.
And we were all, bowing before David at this point because we thought he was this amazing leader of the team.
Mhm.
And not just that, of course, Sophie wasn't allowed to talk with us because, of course,
Yeah.
we're damaged. Don't spend any time with them. They're special. They're with us.
So we were still seeing the really polished version of David and the really switched on version that still acted like he knew what he was doing.
Mm.
We weren't getting Sophie's side of the story at all. So she was then required to move on to the estate
Mhm.
to be part of the church plant. And that was in her contract as well. She was like legally obligated to live in the estate.
Did she get a free house too? Did she get like
No.
a deducted rent
No.
house?
No.
She had to pay for that all off of her own minimum wage, essentially.
And she lived alone?
Yes.
And I can't imagine that job pays very well.
No.
No.
Okay.
But that was part of it. And again, she believed it was for God.
Mhm.
She believed this was for the kingdom of God. Like,
Mhm.
she was sacrificing comfort, money,
Food.
etc. Yeah. To move on and to be the worship leader. So she moved into a house all by herself at the top of the estate. And that's very isolated.
Mhm.
Like, it was probably the furthest walk from the church out of any of us
Mhm.
that we all had. Sarah didn't like her, and she told her to stay away from me.
Mhm.
So we were both confused. We couldn't get close. She thought, oh, Jess, she's damaged, she's weird, she's not doing well. And I thought, Sophie wants to be by herself, doesn't want to talk to me.
Mm.
Very,
Mhm.
It was a very weird
Very
situation.
strange.
Mm.
I mean, so she had her house, but of course we were all encouraged to move onto the estate as well. So as we said, hers was probably the furthest away. Then we had Heather and Fred. They had obviously bought a house on the estate.
Yeah, they lived there even before David and Sarah did.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And then on one occasion, Sarah, who, as we said, sort of worked with us on the odd occasion, said, I found you a house. And said, sorry, I found you a house on the estate as well. So,
Wait, do you know this story, Alex? Do you know how we got to that house?
No, I was going to say, do you live in this story? Do you live in the estate at the moment?
No, not
No.
yet.
No. Okay, so it was David and Sarah. Sophie's got a house. Heather and Fred have got a house.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you guys are waiting to get into the estate.
mhm.
Okay.
Well, we weren't planning to. I mean,
Did you not have to, like
no,
everyone
we,
else?
we
Okay.
didn't have to. It was highly encouraged, but obviously we weren't contracted. We weren't being
No.
paid, so
Yeah.
it wasn't like Sophie had to.
Mm-hmm.
It was just encouraged because it was like, if you're all in the community, then you're all close and you can
Mm.
all walk and you can all support each other.
Yeah.
But we weren't living there at the moment.
Mhm.
And then Sarah one day told us that she had found us a house, and we were like, okay.
Yeah, sure.
We
You
weren't-
didn't ask her to
we
be looking for this
No.
house.
No, exactly. So she'd
Okay.
been looking for a house for us without asking us if we wanted that house.
That's a weird thing.
Mm.
Yeah. And so I drove down to see the house with her. I wasn't really that keen on it. And it wasn't even up for rent yet or anything like that. So Sarah told me to pray for it. And we had to pray for this house.
Right.
Now, bear in mind, it was one street over from their house.
Okay.
Or their future house. They hadn't moved into theirs yet either, had they? At
No,
this
but the
point?
one that they were
Mhm.
given.
Mhm.
So the
Yes.
house that was owned by the church. This house was one street over from.
Yeah.
So she'd
Mhm.
obviously had it in her sights that she wanted us that close. She knew the guy that lived in it at the moment, and he used to be a member of Pastor Ted's church,
Mhm.
so the current one on the estate. And he wanted only a Christian to move into his house.
That's a weird thing.
Well, it's
Yeah.
illegal for one thing,
Yeah.
but he didn't want any other type of person living in his house.
No
and
pets, no smokers, no atheists.
Yes,
Exactly.
that
Right.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
And he had heard about the church plant, so he said he would be willing to give up his house as long as it was someone who was on the mission for God.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as it was someone from the plant
Yeah.
team.
Sure.
Sarah had told him about us, and he decided he wanted to move to be closer to his daughter, and so he did agree to rent it to us.
That's because you prayed for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
certainly.
God answers prayer.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
fantastic.
Definitely.
However, we did have to sign a contract,
Yep.
as you do when you
Yeah.
move house. You know,
A rental agreement.
a rental
Mhm.
agreement. We did that, but part of that rental agreement was that if we ever left the house, left the church or the church plant, we would have to give up the house.
Mm.
So if we stopped working for the church, he wanted us out, and we had to sign that.
So that was part of the contract, which
Highly inappropriate.
yeah, highly inappropriate. But you can see now how deeper we were now wading into this cult.
Mm-hmm.
How that we were actually our housing was involved in the church.
And it was a street over from David and Sarah, so
Yeah.
we were getting closer and closer and closer, and our housing situation now depended on us staying in the team.
Mhm.
Yes.
Like, how controlling is that?
Yeah,
That's pretty bad.
that's
Yeah.
pretty bad.
And we thought at the time, well, we're not going to leave the church plant. This is our calling from God. Like, God wants us here.
He wants us in the community. He wants us to work
Mhm.
with the church plant. This is fantastic. You know, of course we'll sign this.
When you started to deconvert, did that ever worry you?
Oh, that was a massive worry
Yes.
for
Yeah.
us. That was
Yes.
a massive worry for us. Because it was also a very inappropriate tenant-landlord situation. Like, he would text you all the time.
Mhm.
He'd turn up for post because he never got his post
Right.
Like, redirected.
Yeah.
So he'd always come back down to the city because he'd want to pick up his post, and then he'd want to ask about the church. So anytime he would see us, he'd be like, how's the church going? How's your congregation going? He wanted like
The
church
details.
Mhm.
Yeah.
church updates from his tenants. And
Mm-hmm.
it was highly inappropriate. It was a horrible living situation. But we signed it because God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Red flags, anyone? Does that worry you at all, Alex?
That is concerning.
That is an unhealthy situation.
Yeah.
Now, David and Sarah obviously hadn't moved into their house yet, so they were in a really, really lovely house,
Mhm.
4 bedrooms, everything else. It was, you know, overlooking the city, and it was fantastic. But they were going to be given another house near the church for the church plant. Now, it was the biggest house the biggest house in the whole of the estate
Mm-hmm.
by far.
Like,
Mhm.
big driveway, big garage. It had massive, like, floor to ceiling windows. It had
Yeah.
a big wraparound garden. It was lovely, really
Overlooked-
beautiful.
Overlooked countryside and everything else. It was a beautiful house. So they decided, obviously, they had to go down to view the house
Yeah.
to see where they're going to go. And again, remember that all of their moving costs and everything are taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
So the removers will not just come; they pack for you
Yeah,
and wrap
they
everything
do.
up, and then put it in their trucks, and then take it down, and then unpack, and
Mm-hmm.
they do the whole lot. That's all done for them. But they went down to this house they got the keys to have a look around. They're all excited, and they walked in and they burst out crying. Not just Sarah, but David as well, and the
Okay.
children, because it wasn't big enough.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So they were shown this house, and they were so upset that it just wasn't big enough. And so the church council, they showed them around, agreed to make changes, structural changes. They agreed to do driveways and fencing and garden structures and everything.
And move walls, like
And
internal
move walls,
walls of
yeah.
the house were moved.
Had you seen their old house beforehand?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And would you say it was a big downgrade?
No, not at
No,
all. It wasn't
not
a
in
the
downgrade at
slightest.
all. It was just laid out differently, and I think they just expected to be put in
Mhm.
like a bigger house because they were leaders of the project now.
Yeah.
And it was a gorgeous house,
Yeah,
honestly.
stunning.
And the council paid for decoration costs. They got several £1,000s for decoration, several £1,000s for alterations. They had dropped curbs put in,
Bloody
everything.
hell.
New flooring as well, so all the carpets and flooring,
All paid for
all paid for.
by the council. Now, on the
Mhm.
flip side, the house that we were being encouraged, like at prayer meetings, encouraged to move into,
Did God tell you to move into this house?
God told us to, David and Sarah told
Yeah.
us to, the whole team prayed about it.
Yeah.
We had to sell our car to move into that house because we had no money and
Sure.
it was going to cost thousands to move.
Mm-hmm.
There was holes in the ceiling.
I remember you had to really do it up. It looks
We-
great
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, I mean, we had to pay for it ourselves.
Yeah.
Obviously, because we weren't employed by the church. Yeah, there was a big hole in the ceiling in the kitchen. There was flooring had to be ripped up.
Yeah.
It was
It was a mess.
in a rough
an
state.
Absolute mess.
So we were told which house to move into. We had to
Yeah.
sell possessions to move into that house, to be closer to the project, to be closer to our leaders.
That does sound questionable, I'm
Yeah.
not gonna lie.
And when
Doesn't
the
that
leaders
sound questionable?
have their own house, beautiful house, well, the biggest house in the area,
Mm-hmm.
and they had everything done for them, whereas we had to sell everything to have our own house.
Mm-hmm.
And something which I still, Jess, gets frustrated with me, but I still get angry about, is that when David and Sarah moved, obviously they had removers and everything else, but we were also all encouraged to help. So the rest of the team were all then also, we had to be there to help them on their way, to make sure everything was right. And, even people like Jim were coming after work to help plumb in something, but they had everything done for them. Meanwhile, we moved in a week or two later into our place. Jess was really ill in
Mhm.
bed, and so I had to do it all myself.
Where was
And
the team? Did the team not want to come and help?
The
I
team
asked-
didn't like us. The team didn't know
Oh,
us.
yeah.
And I put on the group, please anyone, I'm moving today. I'd really appreciate some help, please.
Mm-hmm.
Not one person.
not even David and Sarah.
Not David and Sarah. Not
Mhm.
one person helped.
And we didn't have a mover's van. We didn't have any money at all. We'd literally sold our car to move into this house. So
yeah.
Tom had to do it all by hand
Mm-hmm.
in just car trips and moving stuff
And then
over.
I got a man with a van to move the big stuff, but I had to move it all over myself, and not one person helped. I was so angry.
Yeah.
I had to
would
get the
be.
wardrobes down the stairs by myself.
Yeah.
To put into the van, because no one from the team helped. Because of course, we were damaged people. They didn't want to come close to us.
That doesn't really sound like a very good team.
No.
No.
Very, very unhealthy even from the
Yeah.
beginning.
Did
But
anyone help Sophie and Heather and Fred move in?
Heather and Fred had moved in before we even knew
Oh, of
them,
course,
so before
yeah.
the plant
Mhm.
started. And Sophie didn't have anything to move in really because she'd moved from her parents' house.
Oh,
so she
sure.
just had a couple suitcases.
Yeah.
and
Our parents helped.
yeah,
her
there wasn't
Yeah.
furniture or anything
Okay.
like that. But yeah, so we moved in, and we had gotten into a bad financial position
Mm.
to move in.
Yes.
We'd sacrificed a lot for the church, and we've talked about before how being on this church plan affected our job,
Mm-hmm.
our business,
Your finances.
our finances. Don't
Yes.
worry, because we just became consumed with this project. As soon as we moved onto the estate, it was
Mm.
our identity. That's who we were, because everyone had to know who you were
Mhm.
moving into the estate. So people would ask you questions, and you had to be this persona, this church person.
I mean, literally walking the dogs. Normally you'd walk a dog and say morning, and the other
Mm-hmm.
person would say morning as you walk by.
Yeah.
But this time it would almost be elevators. Speech would be morning, and they say morning, and they say, "Oh, I'm," and you just go straight into it. "Oh, I've just moved in because I'm part of the new church plant," and it'd be like, so yeah, I would speak to people walking the dog.
Unwarranted conversation. If I was just out for a walk and I said morning, and then you started talking to me, I'm like, oh my god, get away from me.
Yeah, you would.
I
you
don't care
would.
for you.
Yeah,
But we were so consumed with this project, and now
Mhm.
we were physically in,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd lost a lot of money to do so. So we're in an even more vulnerable state.
Just before you moved out, even up to after you deconverted and all that, were you still known in the community as churchy people?
I think so, yeah, because that's how we introduced ourselves. And then you don't go around saying, "Oh, by the way, I'm an atheist now."
Yeah.
So I think so.
yeah.
But we were also a street over from David and Sarah, so we were at their house every night now. We could walk to each other's houses,
Mhm.
which is getting more intense and more tangled. But obviously at the time we thought this is where God wants
Yeah,
us.
this is fantastic.
We've done the right thing. We're on our mission. This is our calling.
Mhm.
Wild. Just
Yeah.
truly wild behaviour from us there.
You can see how that whole you get wrapped up in it though, because you're part of this community. You're all moving closely. You're in the community together, and
Yeah.
you can see the appeal of it.
Yes.
If you're getting like getting spiritual stuff for it, I don't really know how to say that. If you're getting spiritual stuff for it, you've got a community behind you.
I
Yeah,
mean, in a sense, it's moving into a commune, but without,
yeah,
Mhm.
in one sense, but there's more people because we're on an estate. But
Mhm.
essentially, we were moving into a commune.
But it was a very uneven power dynamic from the beginning because David and Sarah had all these resources and all this support, and then we tried to do the same thing, which we thought for God, but we literally like sold possessions, and
Mhm.
we'd more isolated ourselves from Tom's family
Yeah,
as well.
sure.
It put us in a bad situation with Tom's family, so
Yeah.
we were really kind of screwing ourselves over for David and Sarah at this point.
Mhm.
And if you think, now we're in a bad situation financially, and now our house depends on the church,
Mhm.
it's like we're really quite stuck in
Yeah.
a sense here,
And you became more dependent on the plant succeeding and,
Yeah.
and David and Sarah doing well because we're
You've
literally
invested so much.
yeah, like we had to fix up this house and
Yeah.
Mm,
not healthy.
no,
From the outside, you're screaming at yourself like, "Don't do it, don't do
Yeah.
it!" But we did it.
we didn't.
I remember we went to go and buy paint, and we were sat in the coffee shop of like B&Q or something, which is weird that we were doing this. And I think you were worried about buying paint and like the cost of the paint at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it was crippling us honestly. Like
Yeah.
we had no money in savings, and so we sold things to be able to do up this house to make it livable, so that we could make the church happy.
Yeah.
That's not normal. That's
No.
not good.
And we were taking a lot of time off work
Yeah.
so that we could be part of this team on this new estate. So we weren't actually making a lot of money from our employment
Mhm.
either. In
Mhm.
fact, very little at this stage.
Mhm.
Not healthy.
No.
No. At the time, did it look worrying to you at all? Were you like, "Why are you moving?" Or
No, I think it was more like matter of fact, like, oh yeah, we're moving. I don't think you told us at the time that it was for this church plant. You didn't tell us how
Deep.
deep and in contract it was.
okay,
Because I think if you told us that, we would have been like,
girl.
don't sign that.
Yeah.
Don't sign that.
Yeah,
Because that's
sure.
weird.
So that kind of sounds like I knew it was weird. If I didn't tell people,
Yeah, I think with hindsight, the things that you left out, you're probably aware that it's
Yes.
a bit weird.
yeah.
So I'm moving into this place. Oh, we've got to do it up a bit, but the rent's a bit cheaper. Oh, cool, no worries. And
yeah.
Sure.
money's a bit, tight at the moment. Oh, well, small business, that's fair.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
happens.
Sure.
So it
Ups
didn't
and
seem
downs.
worrying at all.
No.
No. Okay.
With the information you've given me now,
Very.
don't sign that contract.
Yeah.
But
Too
yeah.
late.
Too late. We did
Yeah.
it.
You did it. You surely did.
We did it for God.
Yay.
Woohoo.
But anyway, so we moved in to this house and we all thought it would bring us closer. Wonderful. Now that summer, we were all, as a team, going to attend a Christian conference.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a week-long Christian conference / festival type thing, I suppose they'd call it.
Mm-hmm.
Before we'd officially left the mother church from the village, because we all wanted to be bonded and
Sure.
fed by the Spirit, and we thought we'd get loads of messages from God at this festival.
I mean, there was loads of teaching. There was loads. I mean, it's a very, very big festival. So, you'd get loads of support, loads of help. And this would be really good, especially for the start of a church. It'd be fantastic. Yeah.
And as soon as we arrived, it was one of those ones that you camp at.
Yeah.
And so David and Sarah told us which pitch was
Yeah.
ours.
Mhm.
Obviously, we all had to pay for this. It wasn't funded by the church or anything. We all paid to go here. It was
What if you couldn't afford it? I mean, money was tight, so could you not at
you
any
just
point say...
afforded it.
Yeah.
You just did it for God.
Did you struggle paying for it?
Yes, we
Yes.
had to pay it in installments.
So did you not mention this to David and Sarah? Like, this financial situation is really hard.
Finances with David and Sarah were very weird because you'd find out later that they just played the victim in every situation. So if you ever told them you were struggling, they were struggling more.
Oh, they've been to 11 at Reef when you've been to 10 at Reef, sure.
Exactly.
Yes.
That is David and Sarah, and someone actually said that about David and Sarah after
Yeah.
we left as well. So you are correct with that. If you needed a holiday, they needed more of a holiday.
Mhm.
If you had been hurt by someone, they'd been hurt more. Like, you couldn't really complain to them about anything
Mhm.
because you always thought in the back of your head, well, they've been through worse.
Yeah.
Just shut up. Just keep it to yourself.
We've got no money. Yeah, actually, I'm surprised we're able to even eat here because we've had to steal from the food bank.
Mhm.
Type situation. Yeah.
Did you know how much they were getting paid?
Roughly,
Yeah.
like we knew roughly. We didn't know exact figures,
No.
but we knew they were doing okay.
You know,
and
they had a relatively okay salary and they didn't have any real big bills to pay.
No,
Yeah.
no outgoings because of course their house is there. It's-
Yeah. Did that not get ever baffling to you when you were like, oh, we're struggling? They were like, we're struggling more. And you're like,
well, they had
How?
kids, whereas we didn't have kids that were still
Okay.
living with
Sure.
us. And we were self-employed, so like a lot of our finances would go to cover self-employed. So I don't know. You didn't judge it at first. It does
Okay.
get worse later on.
Yeah.
We'll get to the finance
Yes, don't
episode.
worry.
I'm always so
But-
sidetracked by the finances.
So David and Sarah told us where we were to put our tent, and it was just in a normal pitch. It was like a corner pitch. We thought that was fine. So after we'd pitched our tent and everything, we were like, where's the rest of the team? They didn't seem to know. And then they built
A fortress.
a massive barrier that went around both of our tents with like a communal area in the middle
Mm-hmm.
that was like head height. It was like 5.5 foot, so you could just peer over the top of it. Well, I can't. Tom
No.
could.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were windbreaks, but they were like heavy-duty windbreaks, which were
Oh, like you get the seaside.
Yeah,
Those
but-
were- okay.
but
But
big
like
ones.
camping ones.
Yeah.
And so they built this big barrier around just the two of our tents that you could only get out by going through like the back and going down the path. You couldn't get to the rest of the tents.
Mm-hmm.
And what the hell, first of all? And they were like, oh, it's because we got the kids, it's for privacy. But we want our two to be connected so we could walk between each other's tents, but no one else could even like see in.
no.
That's weird. Did you find it weird at the time?
At the time I didn't. I'm a really anxious person, and so I was like, yes, barriers.
Privacy, yeah.
Tom gets really disturbed by it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So at first when we were setting up our tents, we just thought they wanted a little bit of privacy, but we didn't know where the rest of the people were.
Because everyone's setting up their tents, and it
Yeah.
happens throughout the day,
Yeah.
or 2 days sometimes. People arrive at different times, so you
Yeah.
just thought, well, okay,
Yeah.
this is what we're doing at the moment.
So to the rest of the team, it looked like a big fuck off banner,
Yeah.
basically. It was like, leave us alone.
Mm-hmm.
And this further reinforced the things that they had told the rest of the team of leave, Jess and Tom alone.
There is clearly a divide between the four of you and the rest of the team.
Massively.
Like a physical divide.
Yes.
They've
No,
na-
physical.
they've now
Yeah.
built a physical one.
Yeah.
And so to the rest of the team, it was like, oh yeah, they're working with them in there. They probably are really scared to be out in public or something. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it was a Christian conference where people are normally, in a sense, worked on anyway, because
Mhm.
God's there powerfully, and so you can imagine what they were trying to tell people is that, this is our opportunity to now be able to really come close with God and with the resources we have available, and this is going to be a great opportunity. So
They would have told them something
so
like that.
fuck off, all of you,
Mhm.
basically. Yeah.
But it's really messed up because, again, you're meant to go to these conferences as the team, as the plant, and you're meant to learn about what God has in store for you on this project. But it was more they wanted to be locked away from the rest of the team because they didn't like them,
Yeah.
Mhm.
which pissed off a lot of the rest of the team. And it pissed you
Understandable.
off as well, didn't it,
It really
Tom?
did, because I felt embarrassed, number one, because the rest of the team were there and they had a little communal area,
They were all eating together. They were
Yeah.
all praying together.
Yeah.
and spending time of an evening. It would be dark and they'll all be sat around and they'd be having a drink, not excessively, but they'll be having
No,
a
but the
drink
nice,
and things.
like around a campfire,
Yeah,
just
that
a
type
group
of
of
thing.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
nice.
I remember I spent one night with them
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
because I was so embarrassed, and I wanted to spend time
Yeah.
with them as well. And it was almost like, oh wow, thanks for spending time with us. Oh, it's great. And it's almost like it just seemed weird the way they were speaking to me,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, well done for coming over here and spending time with us. Oh, we're proud of you, type situation. It's like, hello, what?
Yeah.
That's because you can do that in a nice way. If you go and join a group and then somebody's like, "Thanks for coming over," that would have been a bit awkward to come over and like approach a big group. Nice, but not well done. You did well. I'm
But it
proud
was-
of you.
But it was our group. Like, it
Mhm.
wasn't a group of strangers
Yeah.
that Tom was approaching. It was
Yeah.
the people we'd been working with all year.
Yeah.
But David and Sarah wanted this barrier. And it's not like they built a barrier just for themselves
Mhm.
and then the rest of the team was separate. Maybe they didn't want to mingle with their employees, whatever. They built it for the 4 of us and their kids.
That
And
is
then
weird.
kept everyone else on the outside. Imagine
Yeah.
how the rest of the team, who've been working for these people
Yeah.
all year, giving up their work time, like taking holiday, their evenings, dedicating their whole lives to David and Sarah. And then we get to this bonding conference, which is a week long, and they build a physical wall between them.
So there's a physical divide between you,
Mhm.
and then that's
Yes.
just reinforcing resentment. So
Yes.
Yeah.
this isn't good already.
Yeah.
No, and it did start to make them resent us,
Yeah.
which we'd find out later. But
Yeah.
this is a week long festival event.
What
Whatever
did you do
call
at
it.
this event festival thing?
So every single day there's several like seminars on, there's
Mhm.
talks, there's Bible teaching, and then in the evening there's loads of different tents for worship. So if you
Mhm.
like slower, more intimate worship, there was a tent for that. If you like the more sort of charismatic, screaming, crying worship, there was like different tents.
There's different flavors.
Yeah,
There's
and
different
thousands
flavours.
of people. It wasn't
Yeah.
just a couple hundred. It was thousands and thousands of people attend this thing.
Yeah.
And David and Sarah are our spiritual leaders,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And in the entire 7 days, they went to 2 seminars. The rest of the time, they had like this children's paddle pool,
Mm-hmm.
and they just like put their feet in that and just drank all week.
Wine.
I never
beers.
understand that because you do see people doing that at festivals. Like when you're walking through the campsite and you're like, maybe you paid a lot of money for this. Do you not want to go and see some people?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, this
They
fully
didn't.
did.
they
No.
didn't. And bearing in mind, they are the spiritual lead for our entire team. So it must have looked weird to the team to see us not going. And then because we were in this little fortress with them, we felt weird to like cut off and say,
Well,
we're going to
go.
go
yeah.
to the seminar. We did what David was doing.
Yeah.
Did you want
know?
to go to the different
Yeah,
seminars?
I mean, I
Yeah,
did.
that was
yeah.
the whole point.
Yeah, I'd been to this festival before many a time, and I
Yeah.
loved it there because
Mhm.
you met so many people, you learned so much stuff.
Had you like pre-looked at the talks and like chosen the
Yeah,
ones you
and
chosen
looked really
ones,
wanted
yeah.
to go to?
I used to, in the past, come back with, I don't know, 10, 15 CDs or even cassettes when they were
Oh
cassettes.
God, Tom.
Of the actual talks. They record them all and
Mhm.
everything else because they're so good because the speakers they get from all over the world. So it's
Yeah.
like, this is mega, this is great. So I was excited.
But then every morning you'd sort of check the program, and David would be there, and he would sort of say, "Oh well, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about," and he would like badmouth the speakers.
Like you would in the course.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
he wasn't
like, he
taking
would-
it seriously.
No.
He
Anyway.
wasn't taking it seriously, and he was using like spiritual superiority to
Mhm.
convince us not to go to any of the talks as well, because he would be like, "Well, that guy he's not biblically sound." He would always say people aren't biblically sound,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and so we'd be like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we won't go either." Like we would just go along with what David said.
Of course. I mean, he was our leader, It's-
Mhm. We assumed he knew what he was talking about.
And
so
did the rest of the team go to some of the talks?
Yeah,
All of
of
them.
them.
Yeah.
all of them.
Did
that
they
was-
come back and say good things and like, oh, that was really good and
We don't
interesting?
know. We were
Who would
cut
know?
off. We
Yeah.
were physically cut off from the rest of the
Yeah.
team. We didn't see them all week, apart from Tom one evening.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that sucks already.
But they would then have, every day they would have worship.
Mm-hmm.
And so you would have thousands of people all meet together into this one massive area, where they'd all worship. They'd have a massive band with like the biggest Christian singers
like the
at
main
the time.
stage. We've got the main
Yeah.
stage of Reading, but
Basically,
Christian.
yeah,
Okay.
Christian. And so we went probably a couple of times, but again, David and Sarah weren't too keen,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't go with the rest of the team, so we sat with David and Sarah at the back, most of the time drinking coffee and eating Danishes because they had like a coffee area right at the back, so which was great, but not taking part in anything. You were there, but not actually there.
Yeah.
But then on one occasion, we were at the back, and Sarah got really stressed. She said, "Oh, this worship is really stressing me out. I'm getting really stressed," and so she left. And David then went and made a formal complaint because the worship that was being played at that time wasn't scriptural, and so again he it was just bizarre. And so from then on, they didn't go to even those services either.
Mm-hmm.
It was just awful.
This is all very problematic in Christianity, and this specific flavour is very problematic. But my God, the good food, the free food.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always so interested in the free food. What kind of Danishes did you have?
Oh no, we had to pay for that.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
it wasn't
No,
free.
it wasn't
Oh
free.
no, I'm sorry.
None of
Yeah.
it was free.
No, so yeah, that was a paid
I'm out.
thing.
I'm out.
But quite frequently during worship, Sarah would storm out.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't know if it was kind of like a weird trigger for her or something, but she would storm out. And she was the kind of person where if she stormed out, you followed her.
I was gonna say, do you
Yeah,
have to
you-
follow
Yes.
her?
You go and make sure she's okay because you know
Right.
she is about to flip out. Like
Mhm.
she doesn't take things lightly.
Mm-hmm.
If something sets her off, you follow her and you make sure that she's okay. So we would all go out and follow her, and she got into this. She was like hyperventilating. She was really unhappy, and David was like, "Don't worry, I'll take care of this." So they complained about the worship. It was too repetitive. It wasn't biblically sound. There was one word they used in the song. It was like a Bethel song, wasn't
Yeah, I
it?
can't remember.
But it was one word that they used in the song that she took such massive offense to, and that was it. We couldn't go to the rest of the worship sessions with them. So we would start going to the worship sessions in the morning by ourselves,
Mhm.
and it was such a better
It
atmosphere.
was.
The second we were away from David and Sarah, we could like be ourselves,
Yeah.
and so we could worship properly.
Yes.
When you
Um,
went, is it just like music and songs and
Yeah.
being
And-
quiet and
And speakers. Then
Oh,
after that,
okay.
then have a big speaker from I don't know, from America or wherever. So
mm-hmm.
yeah, and it was good. We really enjoyed it, as you said, when we were away from David and Sarah.
yeah,
Because there was no one criticizing it then. We could fully enjoy it. We could enjoy the worship without kind of being on edge of like, what are they going to say now? Is this going to upset Sarah? Is
did
this
that
gonna...
not strike you as something?
It
to...
should have.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it should have, but no, it really didn't.
Okay,
It really, really didn't.
that's fair.
Yeah. This is why we feel like idiots to retelling this
Mm.
story, but
No.
it should have. Yeah. But it didn't.
Mm.
And then one particular session before Sarah had done the kind of set off freak out a little bit, Sarah had this hunch that I was like hiding something traumatic, and she wanted to like pull it out of me. So there was an altar call for prayer. Is it still called an altar call if it's
Yeah.
just for prayer?
What does that mean?
So the person who's on stage, the person who has the microphone, calls people to the stage if they want to become a Christian. That's an altar call.
Oh,
It's like-
become a Christian. I
Yeah.
thought, surely if you're at this Christian festival, you're kind of already there.
Yeah, but it was like that, but for prayer. So the person on stage was like, if anyone needs prayer, if anyone is struggling with something,
Yeah.
come up to the stage. And she kept nudging me, and she kept like kneeing me and nudging me. And she was like, that's for you. I know that's for you. That's a message from God. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. You know me.
Yeah.
Am I going up on any stage ever?
No, I can't imagine anyone doing that ever. I don't understand the motivations behind it.
No.
No, thank you.
So my heart was literally like
Pounding.
coming out
yeah.
of my throat. I wanted to die in that moment. I felt so sick. My heart was pounding. But she was insisting, and she was like pushing me and pulling me, and she made me go up with her.
Right.
So if anyone's ever been in that position where you're like called to the front, I don't think you should ever be pressured into that. I think that's really horrible. I think if you want to go to the front for prayer or a message or whatever, that should be your own choice.
Yeah,
Like,
personal thing. Yeah, sure.
you should be willing, not
Yes.
forced into it. And I was literally like, I don't want to, and she was like, God wants you to, and like manipulated me into going to the front.
Yeah.
So I was at the front, and this woman was praying for me. She gave me a really, really strong message, but it did not correlate to me at all.
What was
Yeah.
the message?
It was something about screaming at someone that I wasn't a child anymore, and things that just it didn't relate to me.
But generic things that could be relatable to anyone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I started crying. I
Mhm.
started crying really strongly, but it was because I was so embarrassed
Mhm.
and my heart was racing so much, and I felt so like I felt guilt that I wasn't getting the message she really wanted me to. So I just started like shaking and crying. And Sarah was like, "Yes, this is it. This is from God." And she was like holding me. And I was just crying in front of all these people. It was a horrible, horrible experience. And Sarah felt like she'd won
Yeah.
Mhm.
in that moment. She was like, "Yes, I got the reaction out of you I wanted," because she thought I'd been like hiding something from her. We never got to the root of that,
Sure.
but anyway. So she forced me into this very, very vulnerable state, and then we
Mhm.
all went back to the tent and we all just drank for the rest of the day. Just
Mm.
drank alcohol, played board games. Sarah was like satisfied.
Did you not need any time? Like that's you're in a very heightened emotional state. Did you not need any time to just be on your own for 10 minutes to
it didn't-
compose yourself?
It didn't matter if I had wanted to. I think Sarah wanted to like see me in that state.
Yeah.
She was very pleased that I'd got to that state. I think looking back, she got some sort of
And did-
enjoyment out of it.
Did you talk about that experience on the way back to
Never
the
again.
tent?
Never again.
None of you all addressed it. Did
we
you?
No.
we never addressed it ever again.
It wasn't like, oh, do you feel good after
No.
that? It was just a right. Let's go drink.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
And again, if there's spiritual leaders and you've had this really spiritual moment, shouldn't they be like, how do you feel now?
Yeah, they
Do you
should be
feel like
supporting and
there's
There
a weight off
should-
your chest or
yeah.
some
Yeah.
nonsense like that?
There should have been some prayer
yeah,
or getting to the root of it or something, but no, it was just like, okay, we're done, let's go back, and we just drank for the rest of the day. And the rest of the team were getting pretty upset with this, and also Giles was at the exact same conference with the old church, the
Yeah.
mother church, and so
Yeah.
he was seeing this behaviour. He was seeing David, burrow away, hide in his tent, drink all day. He was really unhappy with this behaviour as
Mhm.
well, as you can imagine.
Mm.
Like, our church plant reflects badly on his church. So
Mhm.
if we're doing badly, if we're falling apart, he's starting to be worried, and he's also on the board of the council. So this was starting to look unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And we became really afraid of disagreeing with David, because we would see the way that David would talk about anyone he disagreed with. He would just attack their character, attack their belief even. He'd be like, they're not a true Christian. He would just attack people who he didn't agree with.
But he would only do that away from them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course.
So so he would attack the worship leader, but he wouldn't go up to the worship leader afterwards and say, "Hey guys, what you were saying, that wasn't biblically correct." Instead, he would write a letter to an organizer
Mhm.
or speak to someone else. He would never confront a person.
Under the
Oh,
guise
never.
of going above their head, but really you're just too afraid of the
He was
conflict.
too afraid of conflict.
Right.
So afraid. I mean, again,
Yeah.
that comes out a lot later on throughout the story. He would rather hide away behind his supposed biblical superiority and
Yeah.
knowledge. He would hide away from that with that, and it was just again another wall that he put up himself. And his knowledge was incredibly poor. We find out in the end. It's just like, you seriously, man, you know very, very little about the Bible and what you're talking about.
Did you ever question his beliefs? Because he's getting all of these lovely benefits from it, like financially, a house, and all of these different things. Did you ever think, does he actually believe in God at all if he doesn't
Well,
really know
later,
about this?
Later on, I would question him, and I'd say, "Oh, so what are your thoughts on baptism,
Mhm.
or what are your thoughts on this?" And he'd say, "Yeah, I haven't quite worked all of that out yet myself."
But again, that's later on.
That's later, yeah.
At this point,
Mhm.
we don't know enough yet to assume
Yeah.
that there's anything wrong going
Mhm.
on. So I think we just sort of assume he's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We just trust this trained
authority figure.
spiritual leader.
Yeah.
yeah. So,
But we become very afraid of disagreeing with either of them, because we start to see how extremely they react. Sarah attacking the worship, the screaming, the crying, the letters that
Mhm.
David's write. You start to think, okay, we can't disagree with him,
Mhm.
maybe subconsciously, but you see how they treat people they don't
Yeah.
agree with, and it makes you want to just keep them happy.
Did you guys ever have a conversation just between the two of you about that?
No,
no,
It was never.
no,
acknowledged?
It was never acknowledged.
Okay.
no.
But also at the conference, because it was such a large conference, there was a sort of a VIP area where you could attend, you could go if you were in
Church leadership.
church leadership, but not just church leadership. You had to be like a proper, church leader, like a vicar or a pastor or a
What's the difference between a pastor and a vicar?
It's just different denominations.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
or a bishop. If you're a bishop, wow, you could go into. So you had to be like a real leader.
Mm-hmm.
And so David actually was allowed into this because, of course, he owned his church now.
Mm-hmm.
But he wanted me there as well
Mm-hmm.
because
He couldn't do anything alone,
No.
Yeah.
basically.
so basically he signed me in as an assistant pastor. So almost like, yeah, I was I was a VIP as well.
Mhm.
So I had a lanyard put around my neck with assistant pastor.
Ceremonious
I was
lanyard.
Yeah, I was allowed in the VIP area where I did get free tea, free coffee, and
This
biscuits.
is what we like to hear.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I was allowed that because, and that's where all the backstage, the big speakers would go because
Mhm.
they were allowed to go in there, so you could meet with those if you wanted to. Not that you would notice, because of course we didn't actually attend any of the services, but I was allowed in there, which again would have looked pretty bad to the rest of the team, because now here I am in the VIP area as assistant pastor, and the rest of them were chumps in their own little
Yeah.
camping area.
And realistically, you're just a welcome guy on
Yes.
paper, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly.
So again,
Right.
they're confused. I mean, Sarah and I came in as well, and we had lanyards as well because we were like the wives
Yes.
Yeah.
type thing. And then in that VIP tent, David was making more plans for the plan, and he had notebooks and stuff. The rest of the team wasn't involved in that. That was just
Yeah.
the four of us. Again, making plans without the rest of the team. That's
Mhm.
not
Mm.
that's
And-
not good.
Just for Christianity generally, the fact that there's a VIP section feels very Roman as an idea. I
Mhm.
don't know. Just feels very
Yeah.
ancient,
Yeah.
outdated.
Yeah, certainly.
Yep, that's Christianity.
Yeah.
But again, Giles saw us in there, and he was sort of like, "What are Tom and Jess doing here? They're just team members." Like, he wasn't very happy
No,
about
he
it.
wasn't. No.
And I think he was starting to get a really clear idea of what David was like at this point. I think he
Mm.
was starting to be like, "Okay, so you're breaking the rules, small rules at first, but you're not really obeying authority. You're not really playing by the rules."
Mm.
And it did just seem like he couldn't do anything alone.
No.
Mhm.
He needed you there at all times to make the decisions for him.
Yeah, certainly. Support.
Which meant he also
Yeah.
needed Sarah, and that also meant that you were there, so it was always the four of you.
Always
Yes,
the four
yeah.
of
Instead
us.
of him doing anything by himself.
He never did
couldn't.
anything alone.
Right.
Couldn't. Yeah.
He never went to any of the seminars. He never went to anything alone.
Mm.
Never. We were always there as the four of us.
And we went to basically we signed into the VIP area purely because there was free tea and coffee.
I can respect that decision.
Yeah. Yeah, so not because we wanted to meet with any of the speakers and,
Mhm.
and talk and mingle. And
I think he had to show his face. I think it was mandatory, which is why
Yeah.
he went in there. I think
Sure.
it was like anyone on any of these high profile plants, you have to show your face and mingle a little bit.
Yeah.
But he
was-
didn't want to.
Was your plant high profile?
Yes.
Yeah.
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 I don't know. Why was it high profile?
There was so much funding, and it was a really big push that year
Mhm.
from like the church council. They wanted to put them in cities all over the
Mm-hmm.
UK, and there were so many millions of pounds thrown at it. It
Mhm.
was like, if these don't go out well, it's not going to look good for us as a church, as the organisation.
Yeah,
Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? So it was high profile, very big,
Mm.
Yeah.
for Christians.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In the right circles. It's
Yeah.
very big.
Yes, of course.
Not in your circles,
Yeah.
obviously. So it was now the lead up to officially launching. So we still weren't in the office of the church. We were
Sure.
we had keys and access to the church building, but the office was always locked to us
Mm-hmm.
from Pastor Ted, it was an unhelpful situation. But in the lead up to launch, David bought everyone on team a mandatory book that we all had to read. Would you like to say what the reading was?
Yes, it was the Book of Paul. We had to read a book about Paul. It was the most boring book I think I've ever read in all my life. In fact, I've read just a couple of pages because it was so boring.
But everyone had to read it, and it
Mhm.
was given to everyone at one of the team meetings, and he wanted everyone to know how much he loved Paul and how much Paul influenced his teachings, and he's one of these pastors that is like in a cult of Paul, basically. It's weird.
He is obsessed, literally obsessed. And whenever he spoke, if he did speak, but whenever he spoke, it would only be on Paul or
Mhm.
whatever Paul said.
Is that like regular for like vicars and pastors to have their favourite?
I mean,
Bible person? I don't know how this
I
works.
mean, you could have a favourite, but you would speak about other things. I
Mhm.
mean, you'd speak from the Old Testament, you'd speak, from the New Testament, you'd speak about from the Gospels, you'd speak, and you might have a favourite. You think, oh yeah, Paul's pretty cool, but you wouldn't. That's all he spoke about
Mm-hmm.
because, as we found out, that's all he knew.
Yeah.
Actually, he didn't know about anything else. I could mention things from the Old Testament, and and he wasn't aware of it. I can mention all sorts of things
He would get things wrong, wouldn't he, from the
Yeah.
Old Testament, definitely.
because he wasn't aware. He just didn't know because all he knew about was Paul.
Yeah.
He was faking it basically, wasn't he? You know, it's
But he was fixated on Paul, and it was a joke for the group at the beginning, like, oh, all David knows to talk about is Paul, and we would joke about it in the WhatsApp group.
Mhm.
But he was obsessed. And so it was mandatory that we all got on
Mm.
the same page as him. And it came to choosing an official launch day. We had everything set up. We'd bought the PA equipment, we'd bought branding campaigns, hoodies,
yeah,
everything, cafe equipment. We were ready to launch.
flags, even everything.
Like
Everything was
like
there.
a business launch,
Yes,
like when
that's right.
companies launch. So it was like that. And on our first official open day to the public, David and Sarah informed us on the WhatsApp group that they would not be attending.
What?
It was. I mean, you've got to be. It's been stressful.
They needed a holiday,
Yeah.
and we would have to do it without them.
What? This
Yeah.
is their church.
Yeah, so you can
Yeah.
imagine, to the community, the first face of the church, to the public, the first faces they saw were not the pastor and his wife, were not the employed leaders. It was us all scrambling because we had no idea what to do without him. So the first service leader, the first preacher, was not him.
Who was it? If he was supposed to be the pastory.
Yeah.
We all just kind of
We
made
just-
it up.
Yeah, we did it ourselves.
And shared the roles, and thankfully on launch day there was very few people. Like, it was not hyped up
Mhm.
enough yet that there would be loads of people joining, because I think people were wary of us.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they were hoping
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
anyway. So they said it was almost like, well, there's no point us being there because there's not going to be that many people. So
So they left us to deal with it.
Did you ever bring that up with them afterwards? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
Where
it was,
were
it,
you?
it was brought up in team meetings, but again, this was all unofficial. He didn't apply for official holiday because to miss a Sunday he would have to
Yeah, you'd have to
submit
get-
paperwork.
yeah, sure.
And he didn't submit paperwork to the council.
In fact, he
just-
never did. We found it later on. He never applied for holidays.
What?
So I think he was just kind of testing us to see that it could run smoothly without him. I think he
It's like, how did he justify this when you were like,
they-
where were you?
we needed a holiday.
I mean, they've been working, they've been planning.
We
they've
don't know
been-
how stressful it's
you
been
don't
for them.
realise we've just had to move house. We've had to. This
But
is
you've
what they're
done all
saying.
of these things as well. You've moved
But
house.
Yeah.
you could never say that to David and Sarah, because if we've moved house, their house moving was worse.
Mm.
If we need a holiday, they need more.
Mm-hmm.
If we're struggling, they're struggling more. Like,
Yeah.
they were always harder done
Yeah.
by than anyone else on
Yeah,
the team, so
sure.
nobody could ever complain. So again, we're doing this for God. Suck it up. We'll make it work, and we did make it work. But all of this was unofficial. None of this was by the books. So the council didn't know that David wasn't there, and that a team of untrained, unordained, unqualified people were running this church plant.
Yeah.
I still think it's so weird to look back, because didn't he want to welcome the community? Didn't he want to show his face? Didn't he want to spiritually lead people?
Sure, but
No.
no, he didn't. And we have many a story, that later on where he's just locked himself in an office. If there was a community thing happening,
He would hide away.
he would hide. He
Yeah.
wouldn't be the face.
No.
He would never wear his dog collar. If he was, at these events, no one would know which one was the pastor, which one was a normal person as such.
Is a dog collar a universal name for that thing? Because I don't want people
Yeah.
like, okay,
I know what that is.
Yeah.
other people out there in different countries might be like, he was
What?
wearing a dog collar
Yeah. That's where you wear the little white collar around, just in case that's
to
not
show
clear.
that you're a
You're
religious leader.
ordained,
Yeah.
yeah. People would never know, who the pastor of that church was, because he had either hide himself away or he wasn't distinguishable.
No, he
From
never.
anyone.
He never wanted to identify himself as the leader.
Just wanted all the benefits that came with it.
Exactly, and they pushed so hard that they deserved a break after all they'd been through that year, all the work they'd put in, the
Sure.
upheaval of moving,
Mm-hmm.
the planning. They were just so stressed, so overworked. They needed a day off. We'd be fine without them. Like, we trust you, team, type thing, and the whole it just rubbed everyone the wrong way.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
It rubbed everyone the wrong way. We all turned up. None of us were being paid for that apart from Sophie.
Yeah.
We'd been all part of the planning, the training days, we'd given up money, we'd done everything, and the whole rest of the team had, you know,
Yeah,
loads of people
absolutely.
had moved in, loads of people had sacrificed their whole year for this project. And the message was so casual, so there was no comeback really. They weren't sort of like, "Are you guys okay if we?" They were just like, "We won't be there, team. We trust in ya. Peace out." Like, it was so weird.
It
Did
was.
nobody like send them a reply to that? Like, what the fuck?
No, I think we were all really afraid of pissing David off. I think we were all like, "Okay,
I
I
think
guess you're right." And Christian guilt was coming in as well,
Yeah.
like, this is for God, this isn't for David, we've got to remember who we're doing this for. And
Yeah.
so anytime you'd feel upset or jealous or put out, you would think that was sinful.
and also we were excited to be there as well because, you know, this was our mission. We were finally able to start, and okay, we haven't got David and Sarah, but oh wow, it's going to be great. We're going to get together and we're going to be in the church, and it's I'm really excited. So
Like, we were all psyched for our roles. We were
Yeah.
psyched to be part of this project. It seemed like they weren't.
yes, yeah,
Yeah. But it rubbed everyone the wrong way, and it was something that would keep coming up and up in the team for years to come, really, that should have been such a red flag. This was day one, and they dipped out. They were
Yeah.
like, "Peace out, you can do it without us." And we were all sort of like, "What?"
Yeah.
I mean, we can, and we did, and we still enjoyed ourselves, but it was very, very weird.
Yeah.
And very wrong.
Yeah.
Very, very wrong.
And you've got to remember that none of the rest of the team was involved with us at this point, and we didn't have David and Sarah there as our, like, backup safety blanket that they'd been trying to be all this time. They just left us
Yeah.
with this team that didn't think we were capable either, so
Yeah.
it was a very weird
It's
situation.
very strange. Yeah, very, very strange.
Did none of the higher ups come down to see how like the launch day went?
No, and again, that's weird. Like,
That
you
is
think there would
weird.
have been something there.
With the amount of money they were putting in.
Yeah.
I think it's because later on, this was like the soft launch. And so
Right.
this is what he justified as well. It was like, this is the soft launch. And they did then have a proper launch
When he was ordained.
when he was ordained.
Yeah.
And so they then we had some big wigs come along. So he was ordained and the church was now officially starting, though the church had been going on for months at that stage.
That's so weird.
It was a very, very weird setup.
Yeah.
So that's where we're kind of going to end the story for now. I have a
Yeah.
lot more in my notes, but I'm thinking it probably the next part is so big
It's massive.
and so altering to the team that we'll split it up into another episode because I want to give it as much time as it needs.
Yeah,
So
certainly.
we're going to wrap the story up there with we have officially launched. David and Sarah are nowhere to be seen. The team is confused. The team is frustrated, and we have spent a whole summer divided, essentially.
And we have all given our all, basically,
For God.
for God.
Apparently.
For
Yes.
God, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts. Give me all your thoughts, Alex. What the hell?
Fucking hell.
Yeah. Did you know most of that? Some of that?
I knew some of that. I didn't really know that much about the festival. I think you said, I think I asked, like, oh, what did you go to and that sort of thing. And you said you didn't really go to much. And I thought, that's weird. You spent a lot of money on that. But
Yeah.
weird. Okay. Did not know they didn't turn up the first day.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. That's
Did you know we were like officially launching a church in terms of there was a launch day and it was a big event and
I think so. Because I
Okay.
think you talked about the launch day. I think you said there was going to be a cafe. And once again, my mind's fixated on what food you have in there. Is it free? I'll come.
and how are the finances?
Talk to me about the finances and the free food.
Yeah. It's just crazy to look back on these things because it's embarrassing to retell all these things and not be noticing at the time how fucked up this all was and how many red flags. Every third sentence I can sort of see in your face that you're like, did you not notice that this was wrong?
But
We were blinded.
yeah,
we
we
just
were blind,
followed
yeah.
these people.
But it's only now writing the notes and talking to, and again, every third sentence we write is like, oh, you're kidding, we did what?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'll go, oh, do you remember? We go, oh no, yeah, I remember that as well. And it's like, oh man, I buried that so deep.
Yeah.
And now it's becoming real. And oh, we did that as well.
Yeah.
How ridiculous, you know?
And now we're level-headed and more logical because we aren't in Christianity anymore, so we don't see things through like a biblical point of view. But a lot of the things I'm saying now that were messed up, at the time, I didn't know were messed up. Like,
Mhm.
Sarah pushing me to get the prayer when I didn't want it, and I had all this guilt and shame, and I was crying. That was guilt and shame, not through thinking she was doing something wrong, but through thinking I was wrong,
Yeah.
and thinking that
Yeah.
I wasn't open enough to God, and I was closed, and she was pushing me, but that was a good thing because it was
Mhm.
pushing me closer to God. So I didn't see what she was doing as inappropriate.
Yeah.
I thought she was trying to help me get closer to God, and I was the problem.
Yeah.
So you see things through such different lenses
Yeah.
when
I
you're a
ju- I
Christian.
Just remember, I just have one memory of that festival, and that is when David went absolutely crazy, David and Sarah, and it was at a late night. Band was playing, and they were a Christian band, but they were playing secular music, as we'd call it then, and they were a really good band, and that's when the first time I saw David, him and Sarah were just going mental, weren't they? They were dancing around, and that was the only time I think he actually enjoyed the whole of the festival.
Yeah, because it wasn't religious.
It wasn't religious.
It
He
was just a band.
he
Yeah.
was drinking and he was dancing around and he was having a great time. I thought, yeah, this is nothing to do with God. This is
Yeah.
No, I think they viewed the festival as a holiday,
yeah,
and I don't think they wanted any spiritual input in it.
sure,
They did the bare minimum. They did the
Mhm.
things that they had to go to,
yeah,
and then they saw it as a holiday, a camping holiday, and that's all they wanted it to be. And the rest of the team were very confused.
yeah.
You know,
Do you think this is common in Christianity in these church plants and stuff, or do you think this is like a special case?
I don't know. We were one of the funding that we specifically got was for 5 churches,
Mm-hmm.
and the one closest to us in the city ended because he was on drugs.
Okay.
And the big church that we were learning at
Yeah.
in the city, he cheated on his wife. So
Okay.
I would say most of the churches that we were involved in, there was some form of corruption
Yeah.
or inappropriate behaviours or
Sure.
something. It was definitely a pattern that we saw.
Yeah.
I can't talk about it for all churches because
Yeah.
there are people out there who are in it for the right reasons.
And again,
Yeah.
did these different church plants not come together and go to these festivals together and
No.
try and learn together? And
No. It was competitive
Yes.
between them. So David would frequently talk badly about the other church leaders only when they were doing things wrong. So he would
Mhm.
never be like, oh, they're doing great. They've got X and X and whatever congregation, or they're doing this event. It would be like, oh, did you hear? They're doing badly too, blah, blah, blah. Like it
Yeah.
would be a competition between them. Like it was a game.
That's weird because you're all doing this for the same reason.
You
so
would think so.
Yeah,
why
you
not
would
come
think
together
so,
and do
yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you think of David and Sarah so far?
I'm not a big fan.
Yeah?
Having met them like a handful of times, not a big fan.
I don't think we're going to get I Love David and Sarah t-shirts.
I wouldn't.
No.
No.
But before you knew all this about them and when I was still a Christian, what did you think of David and Sarah?
I thought they were quite standoffish.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause
Yeah,
you know when
Sarah
you-
didn't like you.
No, she didn't. You know when you meet like a friend of a friend, and it's a bit awkward, but you know
Mm.
you want to make an effort
Mhm.
for
Of
your
course.
friend. You meet your friend. I tried to say hello to her, but she always seemed to walk away, and I was like, peace.
Really?
Yeah.
Sarah was very jealous.
Yeah.
And as we learnt with like telling people to stay away from me, she did want me all to herself in
Mhm.
the way that she didn't want me to have other friends.
Mhm.
And so I think anytime I would mention you, she would be very prickly.
Yeah.
And she'd be very like, change the subject. She didn't want to talk about you. She
Mhm.
didn't want to talk about Sophie. She didn't want to talk about other girls I knew
Mhm.
at all. Like she hated that. These are
That's
good
neat.
church leaders.
Yeah.
Good, strong, stable, spiritual people.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Final thoughts?
Why?
Hmm.
Why? And my biggest concern is even going through all of this, if the pandemic hadn't have happened, I think I'd still be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the scariest thing ever. Even though we're talking about all of these things and
Mhm.
all of these red flags and all of these horrendous situations. And hey, believe me, everyone, it gets worse.
Mhm.
I still think if the pandemic hadn't have happened,
we'd still be there.
we'd still be there. And that is very scary to realize.
Mm-hmm.
That's horrible because, I would like to have said, oh, yes, I've deconverted due to the realization that the Bible was so wrong and all this. That has come now, and I've learned so much now, but that wasn't the catalyst, and it's just like, oh, man, yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
sucks.
We would still be in it, and we'd still be working for David and Sarah, and we'd still be on the WhatsApp groups and the bitching and the infighting and
Yeah.
we would still be there,
We would.
100%.
That's a good thing to end on. Yeah.
Yeah, good positive thoughts.
Yes.
So we are going to wrap it up there. Next week is a really big one. Really,
Mm.
really big one. So get ready for that.
Oh, man, if you think
Buckle
this is
in.
bad, yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for listening to this week's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope the story is making sense. Please send us in any questions if you want anything more explained or
Mhm.
more gone into in depth. We will definitely do that. You can email us xcompod@gmail.com. You can message us on Instagram, or you can join our private Facebook group. And we will see you next week from 10 a.m. to reclaim our
We
Sundays.
certainly will.
So,
Bye.
bye.